Today it will be 3-hour session. 3-hour session will cover 4 chapters. We'll start with learning psychology. Okay, guys, for those who don't know me, my name is Siyabonga Zwani, Mr. Siyabonga Zwani, or Cecia. It's up to you how you call me. PYC1501. That's your basic psychology. Basic psychology with an element of life science. And those with you who studied prior to 2000, they call it biology. So learning. So what is learning? So they say we all have a general idea of what is learning. Yes, that's true. We all have a general idea of what is learning, even though we find it difficult to define the term learning. We all have an idea of what is learning, but if you're given an opportunity to say, define learning. So learning is formally defined as a relative permanent change in behavior due to experience. So a change in behavior. A change in behavior is called learning. Okay, so this learning. So to master this chapter, we will be discussing the concept of learning, associative learning, cognitive learning, as well as social learning. It's based on 4 key units. The concept of which is a description of the term learning, associative learning. How can you associate learning, the concept of learning? Learning through cognitive. Remember, cognitive, I said, is a process of thinking and reasoning, as well as social. Social mostly is interaction. We learn through what? Interaction. There it is, the concept of learning. We say we all have a general idea of what is learning, what learning is, even though we find it difficult to define the concept learning. Learning is formally defined as a relative permanent change in behavior. What do they mean by is a relative permanent change in behavior? Let's go back while you were, or from conception. You were born, yes, you came to earth. You have to be taught that you need to do what as a baby, as a toddler. You need to, for you to live, you need to drink milk, whether through the bottle or mama's nipple. We are taught, and that form of learning becomes something that is permanent. You know that when the baby sees a breast, he or she becomes excited. That is eating time. When the baby sees mommy preparing a bottle with a white substance, automatically in the baby's mind, that's a milk. Meaning, learning is a process. From your conception until now, you learn. And once you grasp that form of learning, meaning learning is permanent. You know how to go to the toilet. Who taught you? Your parents taught you to go to the toilet. Learning has become permanent. Sorry about that. Eventually, learning has become permanent. You're told that when you find people sitting in a certain place, certain venue, you greet. That is a form of learning. Remember, learning is formally and informally. Formal learning is a type of learning that you receive where? In an educational institution. Primary school is a formal learning. Higher primary schooling days, university is a formal education. Informal education is a type of information education that you get where? At home, through your parents. The use of a toilet. You need to bath. That is informal learning. From your neighbors, extended family members, your friends. They say learning is formally defined as a relative permanent change in behavior. So if there's no change in your behavior, we can easily say you didn't learn. If there's a change, we can go through that, you learn. If no change, you didn't learn. Straight like that. This implies that we can see that learning has taken place. When the change is permanent, this implies that we can see that learning has taken place when there's a change in behavior. Then when there's a change in behavior, let's look at this example. Look at the following example. So before I continue, normally when I present, I take information from the recommended book as well as the one that is posted online. I just comprehend to make it much simpler. And I like the recommended book because it always has some relevant examples. It's detailed. When I present the class to you, the end I will try to give you theory and practice. Theory and practice. As aspiring psychologists, I'll give you theory and practice. Yes, the key is to pass the exam. However, another important aspect is to change what your behavior, your thinking, is to nurture you, to nurture you in order to be aspiring psychologist, therapist. So they say to look at the following example. Nomsa submitted her first assignment late. Nomsa submitted her first assignment late, which is relevant to us. Therefore, it was not marked. So from department to department, you'll see that the assignment will remain open. Then you submit late. You avoid and submit late. They receive the assignment, however, they don't mark it. If it's compulsory assignment, they receive it, however, get 0. You get 0 mark, however, compulsory, you do get admission for exam. They say you submit the assignment late, therefore it's not marked. After that, NOMSA made sure that all the other assignments were submitted before the closing date so that they would be marked. She would receive the credit she needed for admission. Therefore, we can easily say NOMSA learned that late submission do not get marked. It's an experience, meaning she learned that submitting late, the assignment won't be marked. Therefore, that form of learning changed her behavior so that she submits all the assignments before the closing date. That is a relative permanent change in behavior. Yes, you see, a relative change permanent in behavior. This indicates that learning took place. If NOMSA behavior didn't change, we would say no learning took place. Moving on, like I've said, learning is divided into 4. Concepts of learning: associative, cognitive, and social. Then second point. Second point is associative learning. So if I pause at times, I'm trying to drink warm water here to clear my throat. Associative learning, you see? Associative learning, associative. Let's look at the concept. Associative. When you say associative, we try to associate certain things. We try to either compare, relate certain things. Are you associated with that guy? Is there any connection? Are you in perhaps a relationship? Whether it's casual relationship, love relationship, what's your association with those people? Like in business, they normally say, I'll contact my associate. I'm associated with that company, meaning there's a form of a relationship. There's a form of relatedness. That is associative learning. Let's look at what they're saying now. They say, in order for us to understand the term associative learning, we need to look at the term called classical conditioning. Classical conditioning. So what is classical conditioning? They say to us, classical conditioning, it refers to the type of learning that takes place when a response usually stimulated by one stimulus and then associated with the different stimulus that is normally would not lead to that response. Let me repeat. They say classical conditioning refers to the type of learning that takes place when a response usually stimulated by one stimulus. When a response is stimulated by one stimulus, remember a stimulus, anything that triggers your behavior. As I talk to you right now, you can hear the sound waves in my voice, meaning that is a stimulus. Stimulus triggers your behavior. Refer to the type of learning that takes place when a response usually is stimulated by one stimulus is then associated with different stimulus. Different stimulus in this case, as I keep on talking, another stimulus will be the mouse. I move my mouse so that I can catch your attention, direct your attention, meaning that is another stimulus. Colors, I change slides, different colors. These are stimulus so that I can grab your attention. It refers to the type of learning that takes place when a response usually stimulated by one stimulus, then is then associated with different stimulus that normally would not lead to a response. First, let's discuss this. What do you mean by conditioning? What do you mean by conditioning? So conditioning is simply being used to something. You are conditioned to this behavior. You are conditioned to this, meaning you are used to something. You are sleeping, then the alarm rings, you wake up. That's a conditioning response. When the alarm rings, normally I wake up. When the water beep, 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 in the morning, means I need to wake up. That is the conditioning, something that you used to, something that influences your, it's a stimulus that triggers your behavior to do something. They say, you may have heard someone say, they're giving us an example now, you may have someone say, I do not mind the heat. I do not mind the heat. I have become conditioned to it. I do not mind the heat. I become conditioned to it. So now and again, as individuals, we are unique. There are some people who like eating hot food. They don't mind biting chilies. Then they will tell you, I'm used to it. You'll find some people in the weather is cold, but they just rest their t-shirt on without a jersey. They say, I'm used to it, meaning you're conditioned to something. It's a condition. You don't take breakfast in the morning. You are conditioned to it. You are used to it. This means that the person's body has learned to adjust successfully to what? To hot or cold weather. Conditioning is a kind of learning that happens on an automatic level. We do not deliberately learn a conditioned response. You see? They say you do not normally learn a conditioned response. It happens automatically because you are used to it. At school, and as an indication that it's break time, kids need to go and take a break and eat, the bell will ring. Automatically, even the teacher will understand, okay, they need to move out. They say it's conditioned. It happens, normally it happens automatically in our mind. Even if the bell can ring, let's assume that the bell normally rings 11 o'clock. However, the bell keeps quiet and rings 12 o'clock. Suddenly, the kids will assume we need to go out because they are conditioned to what? The sound of the bell. The sound of the bell says to us, we need to go out and eat. That is conditioning, associative. The response occurs because the spontaneous automatic association of one event, a stimulus, with another. Okay, let's stop there and try to break down this. Refers to the type of learning that takes place when a response is usually stimulated by one stimulus and then associated with different stimulus that normally would not lead to a response. So at times you'll get a response, at times you don't get a response. What do they mean? Then they break it down and say an unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus that causes the subject to respond in a specific before any learning has taken place. Unconditional response, an unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus that causes the subject to respond in a specific way before any learning has taken place. Let me read them, then we work on an example to understand this. Then we have an unconditional response, the response to an unconditional stimulus. A conditioned stimulus, a stimulus that initially is neutral, but though associated with paired with unconditional stimulus. It may produce a desired response when presented without an unconditional stimulus. For example, the bell is the conditioned stimulus. Then you have a conditioned response, the response that follows the conditioned stimulus. So for us to understand this, let's look at an example. They provided us with an example. I want you to listen carefully. The example related to what? To sounds. Related to sound. They say sounds complicated. Let's examine this. The theorist called Russian scientist. A Russian scientist called Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov is a theorist. They're giving us an example in our recommended books. They say this theorist, a theorist by the name of Ivan Pavlov, he uses a dog in his experiment. So listen carefully. He says, Ivan Pavlov did some study in the digestion of the dog. Dog digestion. Remember dog digestion? They eat, swallow, then excrete, go to the excrete. They say he noticed that not only the dogs produce saliva when they saw and smell food. So normally when dogs see food or smell food, they produce what? They salivate, they produce saliva. That's step number one. The study is based on dog digestion. They say he first noticed that normally when the dogs see food, they salivate. You notice that when they smell or see food, they salivate, they become excited. But they also did not do so when they hear what? The bell. Not only when they see food or smell food, the dog will salivate, but they also salivate when, for instance, they hear a bell. This was an experiment that each time I give my dog food, I will ring a bell. Let's say 11 o'clock. Normally I ring a bell, then the dogs will know that food is coming. If you don't ring a bell, normally what happens, you check dog food in the package. No, it makes sounds. No, the package normally makes sound because it's plastic and paper. It makes sounds. You try to open that sound. When normally you open the dog food, it's a paper sound, meaning the dog got used to the sound. That when we hear this sound, meaning there's food that is coming. So let me repeat. The theory says normally the dogs salivate when they hear the bell, when they smell food, or when they saw food. They salivate, they become excited when they smell food, saw food. Not only that, however, they associate some sounds that food is coming. Perhaps the footsteps of the owner. They know the footstep of the owner. Once the owner comes this direction, food is coming. Once a certain sound, perhaps the gate, the lock, you use a certain lock, then they associate that lock with a sound. Same as human. Let's say where you're staying is 5 of you, and you're used to one another. You're conditioned to one another's behavior response. Also in the workplace, you know the footsteps of certain individuals. When I come, as I walk, someone will say, that is one. I know her footsteps, meaning you're conditioned to it. Maybe normally when I walk, I tap my fingers. That's my behavior. Same applies to the dog. They can associate the footsteps, certain sounds related to either the owner is coming, someone is bringing food. That's Pavlov experiment. He says not only the dogs they can associate food, which they can associate food with what? Smell, or they salivate only when they see food. Also, they can relate the sounds, but here they use what? The bell to make it make the statement to make more sense. You see, he noticed that not only did dogs produce saliva when they saw food or smell food, but they also did so when they heard sounds associated with the food, such as the footsteps of the person coming to feed them. Before the food was produced, Pavlov continues saying, Pavlov then developed an experiment to investigate this phenomenon. Then Pavlov decided to do an experiment to investigate this phenomenon, to make sure that, yes, that is true, that when they smell food, they salivate. When they hear the owner's footsteps or the bell, they salivate. When they see food, they salivate. As psychologists, remember, we believe in evidence. Like I was discussing during the week, we believe in the science of psychology. You can assume something, however, you need to test it, you need to investigate. That's what Pavlov did. He wanted to investigate to make sure that is really happening. So I'm coming to this. I'm trying to explain to you with this example. They say, in his experiments, he rang a bell just before he gave food to the dogs. So in his experiments, he decided, no, before I give my dog's food, I will ring a bell. So that's what he did. He rang a bell. He rang a bell just before he gave the dog food. The ringing of the bell is a stimulant, the stimulus. The ringing of the bell is a what? Is a stimulus. Remember the same? Statistical conditioning refers to the type of learning that takes place when a response usually is stimulated by stimulus. So in this case, we'll say a stimulus is a bell. So Pavlov decided to ring a bell in order to stimulate learning to the dogs. A ringing bell is a stimulus that does not normally lead to salivation, but the dogs learn to associate the bell with the food. So the bell triggered a response that normally appears with food. So the dog in this instance learned that each time when the bell rings, food is coming. In other words, the dog became conditioned to salivate in response to a new stimulus, the bell. You see? Then the dog used to it. That when the bell rings, food is coming, then they start to salivate. Then they explain this. What do they mean by these terms? Term number one, they say unconditioned stimulus. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned, not conditioned, not associated learning. They say this stimulus is a type of stimulus. Unconditional stimulus is a type of stimulus that causes the subject to respond to a specific way before any learning has taken place. Then what is that? This is a stimulus that causes the subject to respond in a specific way before any learning has taken place. In the example of Pavlov, the food is the unconditional stimulus. So this is what is an unconditional stimulus. When you write your notes in brackets, unconditional stimulus. An unconditional stimulus, a stimulus that causes the subject to respond in a specific way. The bell rings, in the dog's mind is what? Food is coming, meaning this is an unconditional stimulus because it's not yet there. It's an unconditional stimulus. That is food, because the food caused the dog to salivate. Unconditional stimulus, that is food. Then they continue the same. An unconditional stimulus, this is a response to an unconditional stimulus. Dogs automatically produce saliva to aid their digestion when they see the smell of food. Salivation is not conditioned. Have a learned response. You see, unconditional response will be the response. How do you see that the dog expects food? They salivate. They salivate, meaning it's an unconditional response. A response you see. I ask you a question, then you respond back. I ask you what you understand about associative learning, then you tell me what is associative learning. You tell me through the words. Same applies to the dog. I indicate that food is coming. What's their response? is excitement. How do we see the excitement of food? Through salivation. Through salivation, they salivate, then that's a response. Unconditional stimulus here, the stimulus, the thing, that aspect, that thing that causes a dog to salivate is food. They think of food. So it's food, unconditional stimulus, unconditional response, they salivate. Because they can't talk, they salivate. Then they continue. A conditioned stimulus. Then what's the conditioned stimulus here? What has been done purposefully so that the dog can salivate? What has been done so that the dog salivates? They say this is a stimulus that initially is neutral, but through association that is being paired with an unconditional stimulus, it may produce the desired response when they presented without unconditional stimulus. So let me read it from here. They say the stimulus that initially is neutral, but no association paired with unconditional stimulus, it may produce a desired response when presented with or without the unconditional response. For example, the bell. So in this case, the bell is a conditioned stimulus because we have done it purposefully. It's conditioned. We rang the bell so with the purpose that the dog gives us a reaction, and the dog's reaction was saliva. So we did it purposefully. It's conditioned stimulus, it's a bell, then a conditioned response. Then what is a conditioned response? They say this is a response that follows a conditioned stimulus. A response that follows a conditioned stimulus. At first, salivation was an unconditional response. They say at first, salivation was an unconditional response to the food. It happened automatically. After the bell was paired and associated with food, the bell became conditioned stimulus. They continue. The dog salivation after hearing the bell, therefore, become conditioned response to the conditional of the bell. In this way, the salivation become a learned conditioned response because the bell would not normally trigger salivation. So let's start afresh in summary. Unconditional response here is the food. Because the food is not there, it's that in the mind. Unconditional response. Unconditional response, salivation. Each time the dog hears the bell, it salivates. That's unconditional. A conditioned stimulus. A conditioned stimulus, we did it purposefully. We rang the bell purposefully, meaning that's a conditioned stimulus. We expected the dog to respond. Then the last one, a conditioned response. Now we are used to that dog. Now and again, when you ring the bell, the dog will be excited. Just they say the response that follow conditioned stimulus. The response that normally follows the conditioned stimulus. I hope you understand the example. I will ask you questions now. They say principles of classical conditions. Then you have principle of classical conditions. They say reinforcement means strengthening the likelihood of the response. Strengthening the likelihood of the response. Classical condition is reinforced conditions. Stimulus is followed immediately after the unconditional stimulus. We are using an example of a dog again. What do you mean by reinforcement? Reinforcement, strengthening the likelihood of the event. You ring the bell, you give the dog food. The dog is used to it. Someone works for you, you pay the person. Now and again, you pay the person, meaning you reinforcing the response. The dog learns that when the bell rings, I get food. Every time, it's guaranteed. You're strengthening the response. You are used to. It's like when you start a relationship. The person who calls you now and again. Perhaps he calls you every day. Before you sleep, you get a call. Before you sleep, you get a call. Meaning the person is reinforcing the love, is reinforcing that now and again I will call you up because we are affectionate to show love. Suddenly, the person doesn't call. Meaning there will no longer reinforcement. Remember, before you sleep, 10 o'clock, my boyfriend will call me, my girlfriend will call me. We are used to it. The response is reinforced. They say reinforcement means strengthening the likelihood of a response. We are used to it. Now I'm again that I'll get this call, I'll get this call. Then we move to, they say extinction. The extinction is the disappearance of the previous learned response. The disappearance of the previous learned response. Suddenly, you don't get the calls constantly from the person. Or you get them at different times. Instead of getting the calls now and again in the evening, you get a call during the day, or you don't get a call at all. They say extinction. It's a disappearance of the learned response. You have learned that the person will call you now and again. Suddenly, the person doesn't call you. It's a disappearance, meaning extinction, the disappearance of the previous learned response. Here's the likelihood you get a call now and again. That is reinforcement. As soon as you start not getting the calls, disappeared, the response, it's a learned response disappear. Then you have what? Speedy recovery. Speedy recovery is the reappearance of the response, which means seems to take, means you have been switched off. Speedy recovery is the disappearance of a response, which means to have been switched off. Suddenly, the person comes back, calls you again, now and again. Now you're getting calls suddenly. He disappeared or she disappears, now she calls you. They say speedy recovery. You have come out from coma. She calls you. Speedy recovery is a reappearance. She calls you. It's a re. Remember, it said disappear, reappearance of the response which seems to have been switched off. So same applies to the dog. The dogs learn that each time when the bell rings, they are guaranteed food. Each time when the bell rings, they are guaranteed food. Then suddenly, you'll find that the owner has to attend to some more serious things or urgent matters. Also, the whole family has to attend to some urgent matters. The dogs now are left alone. Then they ask you to take care of the dogs. These cases normally happens. The dogs, they are used to when the bell rings or early in the morning when the sun comes out, they get food. Suddenly, the dogs don't get food. The reinforcement was that now and again they get food. The bell rings, they get food. You as a new owner, they told you the times, but perhaps don't take those times seriously. They decide to go and feed the dogs. And the dog, what to you? They retaliate. They become aggressive. You ask yourself why? Because they were agitated, they were irritated. Because there was a disappearance of the previous learned response. There was a disappearance of the learned response. At times they don't know you. They're not familiar with you. Remember, the first response they used to the owner, footsteps, they used to the owner bearing, they used to the owner certain ways of doing things. Now, disappearance, because it's a new person, they become aggressive. Meaning you have to start afresh to teach them the way of learning. They say speedy recovery. You need to start teaching them that when the bell rings once, they get food. Then continue, they say higher order conditioning. Higher order conditioning means that conditioning goes on more steps further than the original conditioning. Higher order conditioning means that that conditioning goes one or more steps further than the original conditioning. The dogs, remember, they are used to you. Higher order means not only the dogs can associate what? A bell with food. So they know the bell will ring. Once the bell rings, the door will open. They listen because that's their strength. Animals are good in senses. Then they listen, they know will open the front door. Once they open the front door, they know that will carry something, maybe dog food. They know you'll pick something up because of the noise. They associate all of that. That the bell rings, the butler will open, you'll carry a certain object, perhaps food, then you'll walk towards the gate. They're used to it, then they become excited. Maybe normally while you're going towards the dog, you're moving towards the dog, maybe you whistle. They're used to it. Then that means higher order conditioning means that conditioning goes one or more steps further than the original conditioning. You don't just ring the bell, they associate everything. They associate the bell, you opening the butler door, they can hear that you're collecting an object because it makes noise, and the dish perhaps makes noise. You walk, the footsteps, that excitement. Perhaps you whistle. They take all of that. Higher order thinking. Higher order conditioning means that conditioning goes one or more further steps than the original. Then stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization refers to the tendency to respond to similar but not identical. A tendency to respond to similar but not identical. Your dog is used to your whistle. The dog is used to your what? Your whistle or the bell. Suddenly the neighbor does the same. Suddenly the neighbor does the same. By mistake, he rings the bell. Because the dog are associated, when the bell rings, the food is coming. When you whistle like this, food is coming. Then the dog will do what? Will respond. They get excited, meaning they are generalizing the stimulus. Stimulus generalization refers to the tendency to respond to similar but not identical. The neighbor now is doing the whistle on the other side of the house. Then the dog is assumed food is coming. Because that's how the owner does. Stimulus discrimination means that the animal and a person can discriminate or detect the difference among stimulus, only respond to specific stimulus. It says stimulus discrimination. This is a case whereby the animals or person can differentiate. When I whistle compared to the owner, when the owner whistles, they can differentiate that. Nah, that's not for us. The footsteps, those are not the footsteps from the owner. They can associate the different sounds. Even the voice of the owner compared to non-owner or someone who feels them. They get used to it, meaning stimulus discrimination. Means that the animals, also people, can discriminate and detect differences among stimuli, only respond to specific stimuli. Then you have what? Operant conditioning. Associative is divided into two. We have classical conditioning as well as operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a form of learning as well. They say the learning that takes place depends on the consequence of response that the person takes. The learning takes place when the learning takes place depends on the consequences of the response that the person makes. Operant conditioning does not always involve producing an action. It sometimes involves withholding an action, not responding. Operant conditioning explains most of our everyday experience. They say, for example, learning may take place because a certain type of response is rewarded and punished. Learning takes place because certain responses are rewarded, some are punished. Meaning, here we have a choice not to respond. We have a choice of responding. That is operant. They say what we know, for example, that if we break a speed limit, we are likely to get a fine. We know that if you break a speed limit, you drive fast, you are more likely to get a fine. If you engage in criminal activities, you know that you get a fine. That is operant learning. Meaning, in this case, having to pay a fine is a consequence of your behavior. You are driving too fast. Meaning, in this case, the fine is a form of what? The form of punishment. A fine here is a form of punishment. We have learned that we have to drive within a certain speed limit in order to avoid punishment, to avoid fine. This is an automatic response. Unlike the condition one, condition one was an automatic response. You hear a bell, suddenly your mind is triggered. Whereas operant conditioning is not just a conditional response, because you can manage it. They say the speed limit is 60. You decide to go with 100. It's not an automatic. It's not just excitement. That's why you get a fine. That is operant learning. They say operant learning has some consequences. The learning that takes place depends on the consequence of the response that the person makes. So it's either a response you get a fine, or it's either your behavior will give you a reward. They break down into two. In operant conditioning, responses are most voluntary. They say under operant conditioning, most the responses are voluntary. Unlike classical, we trigger something. Things are triggered. You learn, it's a form of learning that is automatically. They say operant conditioning does not always involve producing an action. It sometimes involves withholding or not responding, meaning you choose because of the consequence. Operant conditioning explains our everyday life. They give you an example of a speed light, a traffic, driving fast. How do they break down? They say principles of operant conditioning. The principles of operant conditioning, they say to you, there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement occurs when the pleasant, desirable reinforcer follows the response. Occurs when pleasant, desirable reinforcer follows the response. You tell your kids that do your homework. Want to do your homework, you'll get a sweet. Or the class teacher says, want to pass above 50. Let's write the test. If you get 70, you'll get a lollipop, meaning that's a positive response for reinforcement. And the kid does that, they pass from 70 and above, they get a lollipop. Positive reinforcement occurs when pleasant, desirable reinforcer follows the response. They complete their test, manage to pass 70 and above, then they get a response. The response in this case is a lollipop. That's a positive reinforcement. Then what is the negative reinforcement? Negative reinforcement occurs when pleasant, desirable reinforcer does not follow any response. Occurs when a pleasant, you tell the learners again, when you pass above 70, you get a lollipop. They pass above 70, however, they get nothing. I mean, that's a negative reinforcement. Occurs when the pleasant reinforcer does not follow a response. This is positive because the response is positive as well. Here is negative because there's no response. The response is not positive. You see that, so that's a difference, meaning the person, like I said, the person chooses to withhold an action or not respond due to the consequences. Then there's punishment. Punishment refers to unpleasant consequence of a response. Unpleasant consequence of the response. They say punishment refers to unpleasant consequence of the response. If you had to pay a fine every time you swear a word, imagine that you have to pay a fine every time you swear a word. The fine will be a punishment. By realizing that you'll be punished when you swear, you learn that operant conditioning to stop swearing. When the learner misbehaves in the class, normally you put him or her in a naughty corner. He learns that when I misbehave, they put me into a naughty corner, or they call my parents. That's a form of punishment. They say refer to an unpleasant consequence of the response. You don't obey the rules, then we need to punish you, put you in a naughty corner. If the behavior normally, so you learn that when you misbehave or when you swear in the class, you go to a naughty corner. Then they're trying to differentiate that what the difference between negative reinforcement as well as punishment. The difference between the two. Let's look at the difference between the two. occurs when a pleasant behavior, here is a pleasant behavior, reinforced that does not follow a response. Here, punishment refers to a pleasant consequence. So let's look at it. They say reinforcement is different to punishment. Reinforcement is different to punishment. They say, imagine, let's look at this example. Imagine that you live in a flat next door to a group of young people who play music very loud late at night. You decide to bang the wall between you. These are next door neighbors in a flat, meaning when they play music louder, it's much easier for you to hear the noise. Then you decide to do what? You decide to bang the wall when as an indication that you're unhappy with the noise. You bang the wall, meaning you're used to it. That's a response you give them. Then if the volume music decreases, you have obtained a desired response. That is negative reinforcement. Now, each and every time when you bang the door, so they know that they need to lower down the music. They say that is a negative reinforcement. And you are likely to bang the wall again in future if you are bothered by the loud music. They say, however, if the young people do not turn down the music when you bang the wall, but actually turn it louder, they say that's a punishment. You continue banging the door, suddenly you decide, no. You can't listen to this old lady. They play the music loud. They say this is a form of punishment. You will not bang on the wall again. It's more like they're teaching a lesson. You won't bang the door again. So that's the difference between negative reinforcement and what? And the unpleasant consequence. Let's look at it again. Negative reinforcement occurs when a pleasant desirable reinforcer. Your goal is to make sure that they lower down the noise. Occurs when a pleasant desirable reinforcer does not follow a response. So each time they play the music louder, you bang the wall, then it keeps quiet. Remember, a reinforcer here is those ones who are playing the noise. Occurs when the pleasant desirable reinforcer does not follow a response. Then punishment is when by you want to get a certain response, suddenly you don't get that response, meaning there's an unpleasant consequence of a response. Then we have what? Partial reinforcement. Partial reinforcement means that reinforcement does not follow every person. It means that reinforcement does not follow every person. Only some of the reinforced. Reinforcer does not follow every person, only some of the reinforced. What do they mean by this? Which means, for example, when you play a slot machine at a casino, you do not win money. That is reinforcement. Each time you pull the handle, but you may win money every now and then at the interval, just frequently enough to encourage you to keep trying. More like when you play lotto. When you gamble, play lotto, today you get 2 numbers, tomorrow 3. At some time, you don't get anything at all. Then you decide to play to increase money. Now I like to play with 2 tickets, 4 tickets. Means that reinforcement does not follow every person, and only some are reinforced. Only some are reinforced, others are not reinforced. What do they mean? They give you this, they fall under partial reinforcement. They say there's fixed ratio, schedule, a fixed number of responses. A fixed number of responses must be made in order to obtain a response. Now and again, I need to play these numbers. Or when you're in a casino, there's a sequence. You're playing a certain machine. This is how I need to play. A fixed number of response must be made in order to obtain a response. Maybe I need to put 5 coins at the same time, then I'll get a response. You see, a fixed number of responses must be made in order to obtain a reinforcement. Varied ratio schedule, a number of responses that the rat must make before it is reinforced. Why the rat? This is in another experiment that the mouse was taught that in order for it to get food, you need to press the handle 2 times. Animals that they learn by that. They made an experiment that in order for you to open this door, you need to press twice. Then the rat got used to that. To get food there, I need to press twice, or I need to move the door twice, I will get food. They say if variable ratio schedule, they say the number of response that the rat must make before it is reinforced. Fixed ratio, something that is fixed, constant. A reinforcement that is produced for first correct response after a certain amount of time has passed. A reinforcement that is produced for the first correct response after a certain amount. So these are normally, think of the games that you normally play. A reinforcer that is produced for the first correct response before the number of times. For instance, in an example of the rats, if the fixed interval for reinforcement is 2 minutes, if the fixed interval for reform is 2 minutes, it does not matter how many times the rat steps on the, it will only get food panel after 2 minutes. So compared to this, they said the rats need to step twice before getting the food. However, here they say even if the rats steps 2 times in order to get the food, however, the amount of time, if the amount of time is 2 minutes, they say you need to press it twice. However, in a period of what? Of 2 minutes. You need to do this, however, in a period of 2 minutes. So no matter how many responses you get correctly, however, you need to wait for 2 minutes. A reinforcer that is produced for the first correct response after a certain amount of time has passed. Variable interval schedule produce a slow, steady response. A rat that is strongly resistant and instinct. Produce a slow, steady response rate that is strongly resistant to extension. So in these questions, when you come across this question in your exam, let's assume that the presentation is confusing you a bit. You can't grasp certain information. You do what? You listen, you check the keywords. What are the keywords here? They said different stimulus that normally would not lead to a response. Unconditional condition response, meaning these keywords are related to what? Classical condition. They say refer to the type of learning that takes place when a response is usually stimulated by one stimulus. Here they say learning that takes place which depends on the consequence. So under operant condition is a consequence. They mention consequences, whereas here there are no consequences. However, they say associated with different stimulus or one stimulus. So those are the key during multiple choice questions. Principle of statistical conditioning, you look at it, they say speed is recovered, high order, generalization, know that they fall under statistical conditioning. So you look at the keyword, the association. When they say positive reinforcements, negative punishment, you know that no, they fall under operant. The question shouldn't confuses you. Operant conditioning does not always involve an action compared to classical. Classical, it produces an action, how the dog salivate. However, here they say it sometimes involve withholding an action or not responding at all. Then the ratio, the interval, you know, they fall under the operant. So they shouldn't confuse you. Okay, let me finish this and you do the question. Let me give you a summary here. They say cognitive learning. One example of cognitive learning is our use of cognitive maps to represent what? Environment in which we live in. One example of cognitive learning is our use of cognitive map to represent an environment. I come to you and I ask for directions. Then you give me directions. How do you give me direction? Remember, cognitive is thinking and reasoning process. A cognitive map is a mental representation of the spatial features of the area, a building, even the content of the books. Cognitive maps generally refer to geographic areas such as mental maps. I come to you ask for direction, meaning you'll make me imagine, or you are also imagining. You say go straight, you'll pass the robot on the right, proceed, the shop right checkers, then you turn right. It's a mental representation. They say cognitive map. It's a mental representation. We think in pictures, we visualize. Also you as well, you are trying to move to that journey, you will think of, they said, first robots on my left-hand side, I should pass them. Then I'll see ShopRite, next to ShopRite, the group of people who are working there, there's construction, then I'll find a place next to it. Meaning I imagine. That is cognitive map, straight to the point. Then there's what? Under cognitive learning, perceptual motor skill. One form of cognitive learning is seen in the acquisition of perceptual motor and sensory motor skills. Perceptual motor and sensory motor skills, remember, sensory motor is how you move your muscles, your body, the movement of the body, that is motor skill. How I use my fingers, how I blink, how I talk is motor movement. Perceptual motor skills are based on one motor movement that are guided by perception. For example, professional tennis players have high developed perceptual motor skills. Their action on the tennis court depends on the accurate perception of what other players are doing, the direction and the way the ball is moving, and the movement of their own body, including balance, condition. So imagine tennis players, the Roger Federer, the way they play tennis, Serena Williams, their body is so swift. They are flexible, the speed. They move left and right, left, right, left, right. When they play tennis, they are flexible. No one does it like them. It's their flexibility. Look at the Cristiano Ronaldos, the Messi when they play ball. They are so unique. That is, they are using what? Perceptual motor skills. When you drive, use of perceptual motor skills. The Lewis Hamilton, they use what? Their perceptual motor. You also use our perceptual motor skills when you run, playing piano, even writing on the board. It's perceptual motor skills. So perceptual motor skill is the use of your muscles, tendons, joints, it's body, how you move your body flexibly. Then you have intellectual skills. Intellectual skills are learned. We learn intellectual skills. We never stop learning. True, learning is continuously. Even though you are born smart, however, you need to learn the way of doing things. We learn by associating one thing from another, by discriminating between different things. We form concepts to represent things. We learn rules for using concepts to think and reason. One highest level, they say one highest level of thinking, we can think about our own thinking. We can think about our own thinking. So that is cognitive learning. The process of reasoning and thinking. They say, how do we think? We think cognitively. We use our, like this is visual learning. In short, this is visual learning. Perceptual learning. We learn to use our body, our muscles, meaning it's not just in the mind, but it's physical. Then intellectual, they close up with that. Yes, you can be born smart, having a talent, having intelligence in certain activities, but they need to be nurtured because learning does not stop. Then the last one, I'll sum it up. The last one, social learning. We learn through interaction with others. Social learning refers to the way we learn through interacting with other people. It illustrates the fact that not only learning is formal, but also informal. Like I said, learning is formal and informal. Formal you get in an institution of learning, Then informal, what do you get it? Friends, family, that type of learning. From the streets, you learn that to cross the robots. You learn that when you drive, you drive certain speed limit. You look at other motorists as well. You communicate because you're not driving alone. So it's a form of learning that is informal. One of the ways in which social learning takes place is through operant learning. They say many parents and teachers use operant social learning to encourage good behavior in school. How? For example, young children may be given stars at school to encourage their efforts. In other words, we learn social acceptable, desirable behavior through being rewarded for appropriate behavior and being punished for bad behavior. When you do a bad behavior, you are punished, a good behavior is rewarded. For example, getting a fine for speeding in terms of operant conditional learning, being praised for doing well is a reinforcer of the term operant learning. So we learn social learning, it's informal learning through interaction. Operant, they say you encourage positive behavior and you discourage negative behavior. Whether or not social acts reinforce behavior depends on a lot of social needs. For example, there's a basic human need for security. Yes, there's a basic human need for security. Therefore, we try through our behavior to gain social acceptance, approval from others in order to do what? To meet our need for security. The effectiveness of social reinforcement also depends on the other factors, such as the type of reinforcement that is offered and the strength of motivation to produce the desirable behavior. Another way that social learning occurs is through observation. We learn through observation. Whether you are kids or adults, we learn through observation. Learning means learning by watching, imitating other people's behavior. When a person behaves in a certain way and get a reward, you are most likely to behave in a certain way in order to get that reward. Because we have seen that when you do 1, 2, 3, you will get a reward. When you do 1, 2, 3, you won't get a reward. That is observation. So social learning, you define social learning, operant social, and you know that observation is under social learning. Then Albert Bandura studied observational learning extensively. According to Bandura, there are 4 essential components to observational learning. They say there are 4 observational components to observational learning. We have what? Attention, retention, reproduction, motivation. Attention, in order for you to learn, in order for you to remember the behavior, to understand certain actions, you must pay attention to the model's behavior and consequence of that behavior. How to learn observational learning? You must pay attention to the models of behavior and the consequence of their behavior. Retention, they say, particularly when you study, another word for retention is keeping, saving. You must save a mental representation of what you have observed in order to be able to use at later stage. Retention, you must save and keep a mental picture. Not only take a theory, you need to use your imagination when learning. Reproduction, you must be able to reproduce the observed behavior that you have stored in your memory. You must be able to reproduce observant behavior that is stored in the memory. Reproduction, you're reproducing. Motivation, you'll only reproduce behavior you have learned if you are motivated to do so. That is, if the response of your behavior will be worthwhile. Motivation, are you motivated to remember or reproduce that behavior? So it depends on your interest. If you are interested in remembering that behavior or not. Okay, we are done with learning. I'm going to discuss personality and a bit of human nervous system and sensation, just to repeat them.
I just want to check. I was just going through the study guide while you were teaching, and I noticed that there's a number of things that were not covered under your teaching today. And also, the study guide is a bit complicated compared to your presentation. For example, the principles of classical conditioning on the study guide and what you have been teaching are totally different. They don't even include reinforcement, as you have illustrated on your presentation. So I'm just wondering, when we are preparing for exam, should we follow what you have been teaching us, or should we also use the study guide? It looks like it's too complex, and your presentation has been simplified.
Normally, when you study, I try by all means to break it down so that not only I touch on the detail of the content, but I try to make you to think, to be able to associate the study guide as well as the recommended book and other notes. So what you need to follow is you take my lesson because it's a summary. For instance, these are how many slides? 10 slides. You go through these 10 slides and as well you go through into your study guide. That's the best way to study. You compare the two. Yes, mine is the summary because it's the presentation to show you an understanding of learning. Then the detailed aspects, that's what you get in your study guide.
I hear you, Mr. Zwane, but there's some things that I've noticed on the study guide that are really creating confusion, as I explained. The principle of classical condition on the study guides doesn't even include reinforcement, but with you, there is reinforcement. So it makes me wonder that when you study now, is there other things that you need to leave out? I don't know if you understand me. I'm just getting a bit confused.
Okay, for instance, study guide, what aspects did I not cover? I want to get something. For example, which aspects are not covered?
Okay, let me just get to the study guide because there's quite a number of stuff that I saw that you skipped.
Okay. While you are looking, let me get a question for Zibusiso.
Yes, it's okay.
Zibusiso?
I just wanted to say when you go to additional resources, there is a breakdown of on the study guide on additional resources. There is breakdown material there which is loaded, like learning on its own, states of consciousness and everything. I think that ties with your presentation, because if you focus on the study guide on its own, the study guide is expansive, but where is the additional resources really directs us where we have to go when you talk about state of consciousness, which is like unit 6, unit 7, whatsoever. Right? I think that from where I am, it really helps me a lot, because from the lectures that you're giving us now, it's a summary of what you're studying on those ones. So if I want to get more deeper in elaboration, I'll go and read them.
Okay, thanks very much. So that's an answer to Mabu. That's it. Not only you should go through the study guide, there are under additional resources. You'll find a summary, which is mostly in line with what my presentation. Remember, the presentation is to assist you on how to study, how to manage the detailed information into smaller aspects. So make sure that when you study, you compare all the information. Remember, you had time to study since early. So download those academic resources, my notes, and your study guide.
Thank you for the advice. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Personality. So personality is one of the key concepts under psychology. As an aspiring psychologist, therapist, social work, the clients come to you for psychological interventions, regardless of the type of a problem. You also consider what the client's personality. Remember, you can be stressed, we can be challenged by a similar situation. However, Due to our personality, our management of the personality, our management of the problem differs due to our personality. You know, there are people we have introverts and extroverts. There are people who see them as bully. There are people who are quiet to know that they struggle to express themselves. Even when they're stressed, it's difficult for us to see because they've learned to bottle things down. And our personality as well, they exacerbate the situation. They make the situation to look worse or minimal, depends on our personality. Let's say, for instance, you are driving your car peacefully, then someone take off in front of you, makes you to drive badly. The way we handle that situation differs due to our personality. Someone will just use that F word or V word to show aggressiveness. Someone will just keep quiet and mind his or her business and continue driving, meaning that is due to our personality. We differ. So it is important to look at the aspects of personality. Even when you hire people, when you have your own company, you also consider people's personality because they will either hinder your company or do what or bring success into your company. So for you to understand personality, we need to define the term personality, the relationship between personality and health, as well as the personality theories. Personality concepts. Let's start with personality concept. What is personality? That is number one. What is personality? Personality, it makes people who they are through all of the physical, psychological, spiritual characteristics that influence the behavior on an individual. It makes people who they are through the sum of all physical, psychological, as well as spiritual characteristics that influence the behavior of an individual. In short, they say it's what makes us who we are. We are unique individuals. They say through physical. What do they mean by physical? Personality, you assume that personality is internal. So what do they mean by physical? Physical, they mean your form of expression. If I'm that type of person who always smiling, people will simply say, he is a friendly guy because of my smile. You can see my smile. That is physical, you can see it. I'm that person normally who likes jokes, talkative. That is physical because you're using your mouth. You see? So it's a combination of physical aspect, what you can see, psychological, that's in your mind, then spiritual characteristics, then ability to feel guilt. The ability to feel guilt when you're doing certain things, and an ability to fear certain things. That is spiritual. So as people, we are divided into three. Individuals are divided into three, meaning you are divided through spiritual, psychological, and physical. When they say it makes people who they are, what determines who you are? The character, temperament, traits, type, self-concept, as well as self-esteem. They determine who we are. Let's start with the first one, the character. A character, a person's value and moral attributes that are influenced by education and experience in the social environment. A character, when they say a person has a character, when they say to you, you have a character, meaning you have a value and moral attributes. You can stand for yourself. It's an ability to stand for yourself, something that you standing for what you believe in. You have what? A character. The ability to stand for what you believe in through your values and morals. Then temperament has to do with a person's emotional aspects, psychological or biological. We say to you, she has temperament, she has a short temper. She has a short temper. we are going to a certain event, we know that no, you should leave Sia out because she has a short temper. She won't deal with this situation. Or you have a problem at home with someone, or you have a problem with a certain individual. You choose which people to inform, normally, and which people not inform due to their behavior. So if they say someone has to do with a person's emotional aspect or psychological, biological, you select people. There are people who will tell that, okay, they can manage the situation. There's this one. When you inform him or her, you know there's war. War will erupt. It's due to the temperament. Then traits. Traits are stable attributes, stable individuals, attributes, qualities like shyness. Shyness is a type of a trait that does not change. You remain with your shyness, even though you will grow up being a bit of an extrovert, but there is some shyness within you. It's a strong trait that you grow up with. You might be a shy person, however, have an ability to stand in front of people, do some presentation. However, there's that shyness in you. That's a trait. It's something that you can easily describe you with. This one is shy, but it depends. This one is talkative. You know, he or she is talkative. Friendliness doesn't change. You are a socially good person. That's how we know you. He's social. You can take him. He's social. He will blend eventually. Then you have what? Introvert and extrovert. Introvert and extrovert type of people. You have introvert and extroverts. Self-concept. Personality is through what? Self-concept. The idea I have about myself. Ideas, perception, feelings about oneself and yourself. How I think of myself. That is through perception, a self-concept. It makes my personality. How I see myself. How does one sees herself? That's why people normally say, no, he's like that. He has an attitude, or she has an attitude, meaning most of the time that's how it's a self-perception. That's how you carry yourself. You believe in yourself. Externally, you'll see it as something else. However, it is a self-concept. You see yourself as a smart person, as a beautiful person. At times, it's a positive. You see yourself as dirty. You see yourself as having a low self-esteem. That's a self-concept. They say ideas, perception, feelings about oneself. Self-esteem, a state of being confident, proud, and having self-respect. So if you had to describe personality, if our module was not, if you had to write, instead of doing a multiple choice, this will be a description. Personality, they say, is a sum of all aspects. It's what makes who you are. The sum of all aspects that include the characteristics of the person, temperament, traits, the type, self-concept, and self-esteem. Through what? Through the sum of all of physical, psychological, spiritual characteristics that influence the behavior. That's a concept of personality. It's made up of character, temperament, traits, type, self-concept, as well as self-esteem. Then the relationship between personality and health. They bring us back that there is a relationship between personality and health. How does our personality influence our health? How does our health relate to personality? Let's start by saying stress. They start by saying stress is part of the modern life, and most people come fairly well with the demands posed by daily livings. However, some people find it less easy to cope with others than others. Our level of coping mechanism differs with stress due to our personality. When you cannot cope with stress, you develop various ways of reacting, one of which is in the form of physical illness, when your body shows the symptoms of stress. Physical illness when your body shows the symptoms of stress. Personality type alone. Okay, let's use this. They say, due to stress, like I've said, we define on how to manage our stress. We differ on how we manage certain events. That is due to our personality. What do they mean by due to our personality? They say to you, personality is one of the contributing factors that affect our ability to cope with stress due to certain types of personality. Remember, personality is who we are, how we manage situations. They say personality type alone cannot lead to a disease, but it acts as a catalyst. They also emphasize that not that personality causes certain illnesses. However, it acts as a catalyst. It acts as a what? As a catalyst. Not that they cause illnesses, but it acts as a catalyst. It makes the situation worse. Your personality makes your situation worse. What do they mean by that? Why is stress a contributing factor to certain diseases? They say there are many factors that affect our ability to cope, and personality is one of them. It is generally recognized that people with particular personality type tend to be more illness than others, tend to be more ill than others. Personality alone is not the cause of the disease or disorder, but personality type contributes to the risk of getting the disease. They say prolonged and chronic stress is often associated with prosocial diseases, such as ulcer and heart problem. We are getting somewhere. Here we will explain what do they mean by personality, because we have personality A, personality B, and hardy personality. For now, I'm just giving you I'm trying to relate the two concepts first before we explain the personality types. These personality types. So they say personality is a contributing factor to psychosomatic disease that develop in association with weakness and poor functioning of some body parts. In the presence of chronic stress, let's say now, in the presence of stress, let's say you are a stressed person, there's an event that is stressing you in your life, prolonged stress. Perhaps it's unemployment. You get a job, then you lost your job, or let's say unemployment is an unavoidable phenomenon. It stresses us immensely. They say in the presence of chronic stress and unemployment, they say the weak part of your body is the most vulnerable. Normally, when you experience stress, there are certain parts in our body where when they act as an indicator that you are really stressed. For instance, we call them stress specificity. When you're stressed, someone will say, I experience back pains. When I'm stressed, I experience back pains. Some will say, my shoulders become numb. I experience pain in my shoulders when I'm stressed. Some will say stomach aches. Some will experience headache. So they're saying here, in the presence of chronic stress, the weak part of the body is the most vulnerable. Meaning, as soon as you experience a prolonged stress, if your stress indicator, if it's normally the shoulders, meaning if you get stroke, that's where you'll be most affected. If it's your leg, normally that's where you indicate. If you get stroke, that's where it will be affected, your left or the right side. This is why people tend to respond to stress in a particular way, body reaction. For example, one person may respond by getting a headache, whereas other person may frequently get stomach upset. This is called response specificity. So response specificity within the human nervous system or under stress, actually, response specificity. In this session, we look at example of type of behavior, that patterns that has been documented. They also say cardiovascular disease, the heart problem, which is the most increasing, is influenced by what? Certain personality types. Then let's go to certain personality types. We have type A personality. They say type A personality, individuals who strive hard for success in everything they do. They have a sense of urgency, hostility, very competitive, and achievement-oriented. They are at a risk of what? Heart attack. This type of people, the type A personality, normally our bosses, people who are ambitious most of the time, people who have to manage a large number of things. Their heart blood pressure is always high. Hence they say health. Meaning when you try to manage several things at once, you always have your senses high. You always anxious in order to achieve something. You're always anxious in order to achieve something. Yet they say you stand a greater chance of experiencing what? Heart attack, because your blood is always boiling, high blood pressure. Meaning your stress levels are high. You're likely to experience what? Heart attack. That's what they're saying. They say individuals who strive hard for success in everything they do, they have a sense of agency. They have a sense of hostility. They have a sense of agency, they have a sense of hostility, very competitive and achievement-oriented. That is type A personality. Let me read it from the recommended book. Recommended book, they say, the type A personality individuals strive hard for success in everything they do. Type A individuals strive hard for everything that they do. Obvious signs of type A personality: agency, chronic anger, and hostility. Type A people are very competitive, achievement-oriented. They generally believe that with enough effort, they can do everything. They can push themselves very hard. They generally do not trust other people. Those type of people normally don't delegate. I want to do things on my own. You know those people. You try to emphasize now and again, relax, I will do it. The person wants to do things for themselves. They hurry everything. They do several things at once. They see everything as an agent, get impatient, frustrated, angry with people. They're angry with people who don't do things as expected. They also tend to bottle emotions up. Perfectionists, they tend to bottle emotions up. They get the results, the good results. However, they were expecting 100% results. They get angry, frustrated. You tell them, no, relax. They do not express their emotions. So what happened in this case? Why are they likely to suffer from heart attack? This increased the heart rates. This type of personality increase their heart rate. They increase its blood pressure, which places tremendous strain on their hearts. In this way, feelings of anger and hostility are strongly related to an increased risk of heart attack. In this way, now and again, when your heart rate is always high, blood pressure is always high, which places a tremendous strain on the heart. In this way, feelings of anger, hostility are strongly related to an increased risk of heart attack. So that's why how heart attack happens. These people, they are always on a high. Blood pressure is always high. Heart rate is always high. Once that is high, in scientific terms, they say the more you experience a prolonged stress, what happens to your body? Your heart needs oxygen. Your heart needs what? Blood circulation. Your heart needs a constant blood circulation. Your heart needs what else? Glucose and oxygen. But due to too much stress, the blood vessels that transport the blood in and out from your heart to the other parts of your body, the blood vessels become narrow. Because there's too much stress, they become narrow. Once they become narrow, they cause the blood clot. This is not in the textbook, it's just an understanding. Once the blood vessels become narrow, they create a blood clot, meaning the blood flow of oxygen, the important aspects, the important nutrition, oxygen, glucose, also blood, there won't be enough circulation of blood in your heart. Then suddenly you experience heart problem due to too much stress. Too much stress is not only caused by the external event, but your personality. Because you believe that you can manage this, you are always stressed. You see, you are always stressed. You feel like you can manage everything, meaning the stress becomes worse. They say you also bottle things up. You also bottle things up. Your stress becomes what? Worse. Then two, you have type B personality. You have type B personality. What happens to type B personality? They say moderate level, those relaxed individuals, the type B, they are more relaxed compared to A personality. I'm trying to look for the B personality. Where can I find the B personality? However, those relaxed individuals, you have those people in the workplace or during exam times, you'll find people who study less but manage to pass, even though they fail, but they are fine with it. You'll feel like they don't care. However, they do care. It's just that their personalities don't allow them. They are relaxed naturally. Are those people who do complete their matric? Perhaps when you tell them about schooling, oh, go to school to study. No, I'm fine. I just want to work. I don't want anything to do with studying. They do have ambition. However, they are more relaxed. They are moderate. They accept everything that comes. They are more relaxed. They say those individuals are not at risk of heart attack. You buy your car, is fine. We will travel together. Happily, you buy a car that costs perhaps 400,000. No, they are relaxed. They don't mind buying a car that will cost them perhaps 50,000. Not because they don't afford, but they're always there. They don't have too much expectations. They're just relaxed. Do things as they please. They chilled individuals. That is the B-type personality. They say they're less likely to experience heart attack. That you can easily say they are always happy, meaning their blood circulation mostly is effective because they're stress less, but do more. They're stress less. Because we're different, you cannot assume that they are not ambitious. However, we cannot all go to school. We cannot all earn 60,000 a month. Some people, they appreciate their 10,000. Some people go for business. Some people go for higher positions. Some just little position just to survive. That's the difference. Type A personality, they are ambitiously. This one, they are, however, they accept things as they come. So they're not at risk of a heart attack. Then there's this individual, hardy personality. Hardy personality, they say, they discovered that there are some people who seem to be unusually resistant to stress, the hardy personality. The study of hardy personality examined managers. Hardy personality, they say they did a study examining managers in high stressful position. They did a study looking at managers at high position. Then they say they found that some of the managers tended to get sick after stressful event, while others were seldom ill. Here they are comparing these two. Hardy personality is a comparison between type A personality and hardy personality. You'll find managers, CEOs, or people who are ambitious. However, they can balance between their work, success, and family and their personal life. They can manage. Not only that, people who strive for success, they have a sense of hate and hostility. Not all of them, they will experience heart attack. That's what hardy personality says. They say, yes, you can be ambitious, you can hold big positions, you can be stressed, you can manage a number of people. However, that can be managed. How can it be managed? The question is, how do they manage? What's the difference between them and the type A personality? The difference is that they say both groups were typically type A personality, but the main difference was that their approach to life. They say both groups, hardy and type A, are similar. However, their approach to life differs. Their approach to life differs. How do they differ? They say are similar to type A personality, but they have a sense of personal responsibility. They have a sense of personal responsibility. How they have a sense of personal responsibility? They say their work and family and other stable values. They know how to balance the sense of responsibility. They consider their health. They do consider, they spend time with the family. They have a sense of control. They have a sense of control over their work and their personality. They tended to see life as a series of challenges rather than a threat or a problem. They tended to see life as a challenge rather than a threat or problem. You see? They see life as a challenge. What's the difference between a person who sees life as a challenge and a person who sees life as a problem? A person who sees life as a challenge accepts defeats. We're intending to get 4 million in this company over the period perhaps of 2 months. Then it happens that you don't get 2 million. It's a challenge. How are you planning to get 2 million next month? You relax, you break it down. Then there are people, if they don't get that million, they get frustrated, they get stressed. That's the difference between the two. Here you get stressed, they see a problem. Perhaps they feel like their jobs will be taken. They will be fired. They are too ambitious, they need that money. Whereas this one accepts defeat because he sees life as a challenge. He or she has expectations that they win or lose. It's fine. That is the hard personality. They say they are unlikely to experience heart attack because they can balance their life. They consider their family very well, their work, their health. They have a sense of control. They see life as a challenge. Moving on. So one thing nice about psychology, this module, they give you problems, then the strategies on how to manage them, like here. How to manage this? They say strategies for reducing hostility. Strategies for reducing hostility. But mostly strategies that are used by hardy personality and type A personality. Meaning they're giving advice to type A personality. They say, review your thoughts, anger, hostility in a journal or diary. So now again, you need to manage your thoughts, hostility, through a diary. You are normally told that when you experience something, let's say it's a challenge for you to talk to other people or don't have people in your life. You find some people, they don't have those people who can talk to in their lives. Write things down. Pen and paper, write things down. Speak to yourself. Interrupt the hostile thoughts. Learn to interrupt the hostile thoughts. How do you interrupt the hostile thoughts? Perhaps play games. Find someone to talk about something else. Watch things that excite you on TV. Take a jog. Do self-reflection, be empathic. Learn to laugh at yourself. Laugh at your problems. Sit down and laugh at your problems. If you feel like you have embarrassed yourself, you need to be the first to laugh at yourself. Make fun about your problems. Make fun about your challenges. Make fun about your embarrassment. Learn how to relax. Practice again trusting people. Because the reason is saying review your thoughts, anger in a diary, or speak to yourself or speak to oneself. At times it's because once you are hostile, once you're a hostile person, always the sense of urgency, some people tend to move away from you because they feel pressure. Once you're around them, you bring that pressure. You need to work, you need to do this, I need to achieve this. Then they know at times they say you are boring. And then lose hope in you. They say learn to trust yourself, delegate. You cannot do things on your own. Practice trusting people, delegate. Make an effort to listen carefully to other people. Then to make your point without being aggressive. Do not let small irritation get into your way and pretend that today is the best day of your life. No. Don't lie to yourself. Try to forgive people rather than blame them. We all have shortcomings. So this is an advice to type A personality. These are the keywords, the 12 advices that we give to the type A personality. Personality traits. We have different types of personality traits. One, we have trait theory, the psychoanalytical approach, behaviorist approach, humanistic approach, Maslow, self-evaluation, the biological approach. The last one is African approach. Then you are done with personality. Let me try to be quick because we have 2 more lessons that I need to brush up. It's a repetition. So remember what you said about traits. Traits, aspects like shyness, being talkative, are aspects in your life that you live. You learn to live by them throughout your life. When you describe one, you say the shy person. You say the shy person because we know him for a long period that you know that he's shy, regardless of whether at times you become a bit of an extrovert. Perhaps when you have drank some things, you become a bit of an extrovert. You are friendly. We know that this guy is friendly. As soon as you become quiet, you know that something is wrong. As soon as you stop smiling, you know that something is wrong because you know that you are smiling. You are friendly, you are talkative. So those are the trait theories. Albert's trait theory says that the best way to understand and predict people's behavior was to find out what they value and what they strive for. That's according to this theory. You look at what people value. The best way to understand people, to learn people's behavior, is to check on what they value, what do they strive for. That's how you can manage to understand people. You look at what they value and what they strive for. That is the things that they will strive for to attain. His view was the most important trait and motivational trait related to values. For example, a man who values money more than the family life will be expected to spend most of the time at work. You'll be expected to go for promotions at work more than family, meaning the person will spend most of the time at work. If you value money, you spend most of the time at work more than the family or friends, because your goal is to make money more than anything. That is all part. The same stresses that the best way to understand people, the best way to predict people's behavior was to find out what they value. That's how they get us. You see in the movies, you see politicians, if they want to get you or to do something for them, most people they say, give him money or her money. If you like women, in some instance, they want to get you fired. They want to pay revenge. Then they send a woman. Those are examples. They send perhaps a woman. Then they know that you don't ever stop. You you're easy target in that process. Same applies to women. They know where your weakness. They know where your vulnerability. Then they send a man into your life. Then destroys your life. So they look at what they say. The best way to understand and predict people's behavior was to find out what they value and what they strive for. Your challenge is money. I don't have money. Then there are strategies for you to get money. Chances are you go for it. There's a need for a man in your life. There's a need for a woman in your life. Or you like having multiple partners. You like sex so much. Meaning that's what you value. That's what you strive for. Meaning the catch will be sending a man into your life, sending a woman into your life. That's what you value. So I'm just making an example under all parts. What you value and what you strive for. It's an easiest way to understand your behavior or to predict your behavior. That is all parts. Then they continue by saying there's another theory called Cartel's source trait. Cartel's source trait. Cartel wanted to learn how traits were linked and began by studying visible aspects of personality and surface traits. Cartel learned how traits were linked. So there's a linkage of traits. Trait aspect, there's a linkage. What linkage are they talking about? They say he obtained data on the surface traits of a large people, analyzed the data and observed the surface traits often appear in the class of groups. I want to make it simpler for you to say some traits appear together so often that they seem to represent more basic traits. What do they mean by these traits? They say behavior is associated. You cannot learn We cannot study a person looking at one aspect, but the only way to study a person is to look at different aspects in people's behavior. That is, perhaps, they say, the individual's dominance in life. How are you influenced? What is it that you like? What are your interests? So to study a person, we need to look at the holiness of the person. What influences you? What do you like? Your age. Where are you from? What's your career? There are sources of trade. The different sources of trade, that is Cartier source trade. They say wanted to learn how trades were linked. So when you are shy, they don't just look at shyness, they look at other aspects of your traits. Talkative, are you a quiet person? Are you introvert or an extrovert? That's how to study a person holistically. Then you have what? 5-factor model. All these theories are under trait theory. You have 5-factor model. The best way to understand a person is through these 5 factors. Factor number 1, extroversion. It determines how introverted are you or how introverted are you. Extroversion, how introverted are you, how extroverted are you. Agreeableness, how friendly, nurturing, caring, compare to being cold, indifferent, spiteful, and self-centered. Conscientiousness, how self-disciplined, how responsible and achieving. Neuroticism, how negative and having upsetting emotions, anxious and unhappiness. Are you open to experience? How intelligent are you? Imaginative, open to new ideas. This is what you need to look at. The 5 factors: introversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and openness. They fall under what? Trait theory. Trait theory you find on report, Carten and the 5 factors. The second one is psychoanalytic theory. You learn about psychoanalytic theory from your first level until you do your master's. Psychodynamic theory arouses when this content. Psychoanalytic theory arose from this concept of just examining personality traits as much as a way of understanding the behavior. Psychodynamic theory tries to probe under the surface of personality to examine what makes us become the way we do things. Psychoanalytic theory, the best known psychodynamic theory, emerges from Freud theory. So psychoanalytic theory is Freud theory. Normally emphasizes what? Conscious and unconscious factors. That we do certain things consciously, we do certain things unconsciously. But according to psychodynamics, they say some actions are unconsciously. Our behaviors at times are unconsciously. What do they mean by that? They say Freud was a medical doctor on the basis of talking to his parents about their thoughts and feelings. He concluded that ill health resulted from conflict about sexuality and aggressiveness. Ill health is a result of one's sexuality and aggressiveness. What does he mean? Ill health is a result of our sexuality and aggressiveness. The central theme of Freud's theory is that people are that the behavior is an outcome of our wishes. The central theme of Freud's theory is that behavior is the outcome of our wishes, desires, and feelings that people are unaware of. In other words, the so-called unconscious thought. According to Freud's theory, people have 3 types of primitive unconscious instincts. So we have, according to Freud, under psychoanalytic theory, certain things are unconscious. You are born with them. They are unconscious. Why? They say sexual instinct. This influence the experience and behavior that generates pleasure. According to Freud, as individuals, there are certain desires that we can't control, which influences what? Our personality. They say sexual instinct. This influences the experiences and behavior that generates pleasure. We need pleasure. It's an effect that you are born with. You need to be affectionate. Affectionate does not just talk about sexual intercourse. It talks about hugs, kiss. There's a need to love. There's a need to have people who love you and you love back. There's a sense of belonging, not just sexual intercourse. These influence the experiences and behavior to generate pleasure. We need to have that sense of pleasure in order to behave what appropriately. They say ego instinct. Ego instinct, this influence experience and behaviors associated with the preservation of the self. People will say we have an ego. So I think that you are born with. We cannot control. Yes, we can control how we manage them. However, there's a need. They have to be fulfilled in order to manage certain things. The hostility instinct. This influence aggressive experience and behavior. This influence aggressive, when you come across a danger, regardless of whether you have learned or you can manage your emotions, there's a sort of aggressiveness that you will trigger. Whether you fight or you run away or you just move on, but there's that aggressiveness. You are born like that. First say, in first view, these instincts are innate. They generate tension, energy that causes the person to behave in a way that releases the tension. There are two principles that regulate instinct. The pleasure principle. The pleasure principle directs energy in the direction of an immediate gratification, fulfillment of the needs and wishes. So in order for the pleasure principle to be satisfied, we need to get that needs, that wishes and desires need to be fulfilled. If they are not fulfilled, then you behave inappropriately. The reality principle enables the people to delay immediate gratification of needs so that the greater pleasure may be experienced later on. The psychoanalytic approach sees personality as a dynamic system directed by three main structures: the ID, ego, and superego. That is psychoanalytic theory. What is ID, ego, and superego? They say the ID refers to the innate biological edges. Yes, the ID refers to the innate biological impulses. Innate biological impulses, again, something that we can't control, is unconscious, the ID. These impulses are unconscious, irritable, self-serving. They demand immediate attention. What are those things that demand immediate attention? Mostly are your biological needs. The hunger, the need to eat. You need food. You can't control that. They say the need to be affectionate, that is sex, or to hurt someone, are things that are impulsive. You get into a danger, suddenly you fight that person, you pull a fist. In the later stage, they ask you, why did you do that? Then now you regret, meaning your behavior was impulsive. You can control it, but it was impulsive. And they say uncontrolled desires. Yes, you can control how you get perhaps sexual intercourse. They say, but it's impulsive. That's why when you tell someone that you love, suddenly you arouse, you become warm. Some will say it's all in the mind, but here they say it's an idea, it's a biological need, it's something that happens unconsciously. Then there's the ego. The ego refers to the extensive part of the self that regulates the expression of the ID in statistical energy. The ID is in touch with reality, can foresee the consequence of the behavior. The ego is part of the system of thinking, planning, solving, problem solving. They say to you, however, ID can be controlled. How can the ID be controlled? They can be controlled through what? Ego. Ego can necessitate that you don't get into danger. How is that? They say ego refers to executive part of the self that regulates the expression of an instinctive energy. This is an instinctive energy. So they can regulate instinctive energy. The ego, in this instance, what does it do? The ego is in touch with reality and can foresee the consequence. You want to do something, ego will say to you, no, you put yourself into danger. is something that you are born with. The guilt that you can't do something because you get into danger. Then you avoid doing that. And the ego, the aspect of ego. They say that ego is the thinking part of the brain. It's the thinking part of the brain. If you want to do something, it triggers your mind that no, what you're doing, it shows you the consequences of your behavior. Ego is the thinking part of the brain, planning and solving. It has a conscious control of the self. So ID is this instance. You come across with a challenge, you want to beat up the person, you are impulsive, you are angry. That is what? The ID. However, when you decide, no, if I beat up this person, I'll get arrested or the person will get hurt. That is what? Ego has taken place. Ego has taken place. Then the superego. Superego refers to conscience. Refers to your conscience. Superego refers to your conscience. Superego is like a judge or censor. If someone does not adhere to social standards for acceptable behavior, the superego allows the person to experience guilt or anxiousness. You want to do something, however, you experience what? Guilt. It's based on the moral standard, your superego. Based on the moral standard, you want to do something, guilt comes in. I want to steal a textbook because I don't have one, guilt comes in. I want to engage myself into criminal activities, but you think of, this is what will happen. Guilt feeling, super ego. Then move on, behaviorist approach. We had trait theory, psychoanalytical approach. Now it's behaviorist approach. The behaviorist approach which determines your behavior. We can start from here, just to sum up. They say according to social learning, you learn something and you behave. Okay, let's start. Behaviorists agree with Freud that the first 6 years of your life are crucial for personality development, but for different reasons. Instead of looking at psychosexual urges and fixation like Freud does, they see childhood as a time of active drives, powerful rewards, as well as punishment, as well as frustration, social reinforcement based on praise, attention, and approval. It is also important. These forces are believed to shape the core personality of learning. They shape the core of learning. According to social learning, which is under behaviorists, they say the process of indication and imitating great personality development. The process of identification and imitation contribute greatly to personality development. What is identification? Identification refers to a person's emotional attachment to someone they admire. A personal attachment to someone you admire. That's the identification. Children, for example, identify with parents who provides love and care to them. When the mother says, "Nice girl, do not climb the tree," she serves as a model. In this way, shapes her behavior, personality. When they reprimand you from doing something because it's wrong, that shapes your behavior through identification. How you are being told by someone that you love, you are being told by someone that you admire. Then you form an identification that if mommy says, I don't do this. If hubby says, I don't do this. If your lecturer says 1, 2, 3, then you don't do it. Meaning you model the behaviors through social learning. We learn these behaviors. They say identification encourages imitation or a desire to act like the admired person. According to behaviorists, many male and female traits are the result of children's attempts to imitate same-sex parents with whom they identify. Children learn through imitation. Whatever that they see you doing, they tend to do it. Because they are children, they tend to imitate any form of behavior. Then you have what? Our fourth one, humanistic theory. Humanistic Humanistic focused on human experience, problem and potential in ideas. That is Carl Rogers as well as Maslow. Carl Rogers and Maslow, two theorists under humanity, they are humanitarian. Mostly they emphasize what? The value to life, how to value life, the meaning of life. Rogers believed that the best way for understanding behavior is in the form of internal frame of reference. That's humanistic. The best way to understand the person's personality, just go deep, look at the person internally, their experiences, problem, potential, and ideas. How do you do that? They say you look at the person's self-concept. Self-concept is how, remember, is how you see yourself, how you view yourself. That is a self-concept. However, according to Rogers, they say, in order to view someone's self-concept, it needs to be congruent. What you see about yourself, you also need to relate to it. When we have experiences that matches our self-concept, in other words, they are congruent. When our experiences match with our self-concept, we say it's congruent, there's a balance. They are admired to be aware and contributing gradual changes in their life because of their subjective nature of self-concept. This is, if you say you are a nice person, you are a friendly person, we need to see it. That's according to Rogers. If you say, I'm a kind person, I'm a very friendly person, we need to see it. We are living with you, we need to see it. If you see it, if what you say about yourself complements regarding the action, then we can easily say your behavior is congruent. However, if it's a vice versa, what you say is different from your doings, you say it's incongruent, does not balance. If it's balanced, it's congruent. If it does not balance, it's incongruent. Rogers also considered it essential to have an ideal self. The ideal self is an image of the person you would like to be. Although we never fully attain all our ideas, the greater the gap between the way we see ourselves and the way we would like to be seen, the more tension, anxiety we are likely to experience. So we have an ideal self. Ideal self, yes, it falls under self-concept. How we see ourselves, the idea, the image we have of ourselves. When I walk on the streets, when I walk in the college, when people are looking at me, perhaps smiling, you in your mind will say, yes, they are seeing the real seer. Meaning the image you have, you wake up and dress up, heading somewhere, they look at you, you get that excitement. That what you see in the mirror is what they see outside. You have an idea about yourself, an image about yourself. I'm just summing it up. Then there's Maslow under human motivation. Maslow they discuss mostly under PYC1501. We'll just give you a summary here. Maslow the theorist says for a person to achieve success, for a person to achieve the end goals, the initial goals, the main goals, the person needs what? To get what? The physiological needs first. Physiological needs first, they need food, they say water, the survival needs in basically. You need safety needs, shelter, and be secured. Love and belonging, you need self-esteem. Then you reach your self-actualization. That is Maslow. Then how can you do that? They give us a breakdown. How can you do that? In order to understand the person, they say, look at the holistically. These are the aspects that you need to look at the person. But how to develop the potential? If you want to develop your potential or live a more creative life, you might consider the following at the beginning. Be willing to change. You need to be willing to change. Ask yourself, I'm living in a way that is satisfying to me. If not, be prepared to make changes. This does not necessarily refer to physical aspects of your life, but rather the way you see things. Take responsibility. Do not blame others for your shortcomings. Examine your motivation. Try to make each life decision for growth, not to escape the fear. Experience honestly and directly. Do not distort information to fit your way of seeking things. Make use of positive experiences. How? Repeat experiences that have given feelings and amazement, renewal, humility, and joy. Be prepared to be different. Accept uniqueness. Think about the standards you use to judge yourself. Get involved. Learn to get involved. They say give some attention to the problems outside yourself. Assess of progress. So it's important now and again to assess of progress. So this is just an advice. Look at yourself. Like I said, psychology will give you a problem. This is PYC1501 and give you an advice how to manage them. Assess of progress. Look at yourself. If necessary, renew your efforts. If you are bored with something, see it as a challenge and do something about it. You have what? Opportunities for self-entrenchment. That is humanistic approach. Then biological approach. Biology, remember, is internal, mostly physical aspects. There are many theories who believe that heredity shapes our personality. Yes, heredity shapes our personality. And the genes. Heredity refers to inherited biological characteristics. Heredity refers to inherited biological characteristics. This view is based on the idea that we have inborn behavioral tendencies that differ from one person to another. We are similar to, there are certain patterns of behavior that are similar to our parents, meaning inherited biological patterns. Perceptual temperament, the way you behave in certain events is because your parents behave like that. Your temperaments are the same. They say, for example, they are peaceful, calm, adjust easily to change in routine, while others are emotional, reactive. They cry a lot, fuse, become distressed by changes in routine. You may wonder how these early differences in temperature contribute to the development of different parts of personality through temperament. The temper, remember, said that to do with emotion. When they say you have a short temper, how you manage certain situations, how you react to certain situations. Temperament can influence how infant responds to who cries. Temperament can influence how infants respond to other people. In the same way how others respond to it. For example, an infant who cries a lot, meaning they demand attention. Those are biological. They emphasize what? Temperament. Then the psychology, but they believe that personality was determined largely by person's genes. So here, under biological, they say, in short, heredity and genes influence one's behavior. The way you behave in certain events is because of which is a generational heredity, generational genes, the similarities between you and your parents. So in short, if you feel that it confuses you, how heredity and genes influences your personality, and you can master it. They say, lastly, African perspective. There's collectivism and individualism. It's an opposite. They say the collectivism, they say first the community, then the individual. That is collectivism, collective effort. You think of others first, then you are next. They say first the community, then the individual. I am because we are. This is vice versa. They say first individual, the community, we are because I am. They individualize. First, I come first, then the community. We are because I am. It's because of me. This is successful because of me. They say collective, they have high regard of the group. Here they have high regard of an individual, of themselves. They have high regard of themselves. Individual is important. above the group. They are dependent to other people, individual dependent. You're not dependent on other people, you're dependent in yourself. Strong group pressure, the opinion on the group is not as important. Group opinion is not important. I am important. Individuals' initiative is not appreciated. Good human relatives are a priority. Individual initiative is not appreciated. Good human relations are a priority. Individual's initiative is high regarded personal achievement. Individual initiative is not appreciated. Here, individual initiative is accepted, is important. As an individual, you are more competitive. This is because of me. Their cooperativeness, you work together. Duties towards the community are emphasized. Duties towards the community are emphasized. The rights of the individuals are emphasized. Individuals' rights are emphasized. Values such as formality, independence, self-sufficient are highly regarded. Whereas the values of friendliness. So when you compare the two, this is based on me. Here, collective effort is others. When you go through it. That in African, the differentiating that as Africans, we are more collective. We are taught to be collective. However, I think change as the time progresses, but we are taught to be collective, African perspective. Whereas this one on the side is individual perspective. So I'm done with the second one. Under human nervous system, the important thing that you need to know, number one, nature of impulse conduction is that for us to make sense of the information, for us to think, for us to behave the way we behave, I'm presenting a class to you, you can be able to understand the information, you have an ability to listen to me. What influences that? What influences that is your neurons. For information to get into your mind, for you to behave, the processes, you receive information through your neurons, they go to your brain, from brain, go to your spinal cord, then you act. That is impulse conduction, the movement of information. From your senses, I touch you, you can feel that there's a touch. Instantly it goes to your mind. Mind is interpreted, then you turn back while you're touching it. You hear a lot of noise, it goes into your mind. How does it go to your mind? Through sensory receptors. You receive information, they go to your mind via spinal cord, then you behave by responding to that person. So this is a neuron. The structure of the neuron that is responsible, that is its responsibility is to transport information. When you say information through the five senses: touch, smelling, what you see, visual as well as auditory, what you hear, through the neurons. This is the structure of the neurons. So the neurons, we have how many neurons in our body? They say millions of neurons in our body. Some studies say billions of neurons in our body. We have these neurons which are connected like a chain. Neurons are connected like a chain throughout our body. Like I've said, for you to receive information, for you to interpret information, as I talk to you right now, you can receive what? The waves, sound waves. They are going straight into your mind. It's through what? The dendrites. When I touch you, you feel the touch. It's through what? The neurons. We have millions of neurons in our body, which are connected like what? Like chains. They are connected like chains. They transport information from one place to another. Through the senses of hearing, I talk to you, that is a process of hearing. It's auditory. I touch you, it's a touch. When you eat, you can determine whether the food tastes bitter, sour, or nice. Delicious, I mean. Smell, you can differentiate the smells. Visual, you can see the neuron now, meaning it's through visual. That is the process of human nervous system. It's determined by neurons. Neurons transport that information throughout your body. So in the dendrites, in the neuron, I keep on saying dendrites. In this neuron, this is how the structure goes. Firstly is the dendrites, the hair-like structure. the first contact of information. I touch you through your skin receptors. The skin receptors, they can feel the touch. They take it straight to what? To the dendrites. From dendrites is the soma body, which determines whether the information can pass or not. Through what? The axon hillock. That's where most action takes place through the neuron. The information is transported through the buttons. Buttons here is connected again to another neuron. How do they connect? It's dendrite, which is the head. You receive information here. It's transported to the feet. Then the feet, another dendrite, will be connected to this, like a chain, from one neuron to the next, from one neuron to the next. How does it happen? The question is, how does it happen? The process. Firstly, you must know that neurons are electrically charged. What do they mean by saying neurons are electrically charged? You cannot feel them, and the information moves quick. You cannot feel them, information moves quicker. Quick information processing. When I touch you, information moves from your neurons to the brain. You cannot feel it that okay, information now is moving from through my elbows. I can feel it through my shoulder, my neck is going to the brain. No, it's in a quick succession, quick reaction. And they say neurons are electrically charged. You saw the structure of the neuron. This is the structure of the neuron. Then they say to you, neurons are circulated by what? Surrounded by fluids. Neurons are surrounded by fluid, inside and outside. They say the membrane of the neurons forms a barrier between the inside and the outside. There's a the fluid surrounds the ion. The fluid contains various kinds of chemicals. What do they mean by fluids? Is different chemicals. Our body is liquids, different chemicals inside and outside. They say some of those chemicals are ions because they are electrically charged. Like I said, electrically charged means in a quick succession, you cannot feel them. So the neuron is surrounded by fluids and ions, and those ions are electrically charged. What type of ions? We have potassium ions which are negative, and we have sodium ions which are positive. That circulate your body. Circulate the neuron. We have potassium ions which are negative and sodium ions which are positive, both inside and outside. They say because these ions are unevenly distributed on either side of the cell membrane. So they are saying to you, potassium ions and negative, sodium ions which are positive and potassium ions which are negative, they are not balanced. There's an ion that is more concentrated on the outside, there's an ion that is more concentrated on the inside. You'll find the most potassium ions on the outside, you'll find the most negative ions, which is potassium, on the inside. So sodium is outside mostly, and potassium is inside. Yes, they say they are unevenly distributed. They are not balanced. Yes, there is outside sodium, inside the potassium. Therefore, the neuron is electrically charged because there is a potential difference between the inside and outside. That's why the neuron is electrically charged, because there's no balance of potassium ion and the sodium ion. Sodium ion is outside, potassium ion is inside. Then we go to step number 2. They say resting membrane potential. If the ions were distributed equally inside and outside, let's assume that the ions were contributed equally. There was equal of potassium inside and equal of potassium outside, balance 50-50. If they were balanced, if the ions were balanced, they say there would be no electrically charge or no potential. If the ions were balanced, there will be no electrically charge, no potential at all. They say before an impulse can fire, therefore, you must be a condition of readiness. However, your body is resting. Let's say you are sleeping, your body is in a resting phase. Then I wake you up, I touch you, or I call you. I wake up. Suddenly, your body is ready to receive information. You are asleep, I wake you up, your body is ready to receive information. They say to you, before an impulse can fire, the impulse can fire, meaning before the information can pass through via the neurons, there must be a condition of readiness. Your body must be ready to receive information. Remember, you are sleeping, I touch you, meaning I'm indicating that wake up. For you to wake up, the neurons need to be active. Once the neurons are active, they say, however, it needs to be determined. You need to determine whether the neurons are active or not. They say before an impulse can fire, there must be a condition of readiness in the neuron, which is determined by the resting potential. That is resting potential. The resting potential determines whether the neuron can continue to process the information or not. What's the function of the resting potential? They determine whether the information can pass through or not, because your neurons need to be ready in order to receive information. Then they say when the neuron is in the condition of readiness, the fluid inside the neuron is negative. Remember, the fluid inside are negative, that is potassium, and outside are positive. When the neuron is ready to fire, the neurons circulate, the ions, they circulate, the fluid circulates. The one that is outside goes inside. The one that is inside needs to go what? Outside. They circulate. When you receive information, as I'm talking to you now, the fluids are moving in and out to make the process of information much quicker. That's what they are saying here. When the neuron is ready to receive information, the fluids start to move inside and out. How do they move? Through the cell membrane. The cell membrane, they say, that plays an important role in creating and maintaining potential difference between the negative and potential. The neuron is more like a sponge. The membrane allows the fluids and the ion to move inside and outside when you receive information. Then the resting potential is an electrically charge brought by the difference between positive and negative ions. Yes, the movement inside the outside of the neuron. There's movement because you are receiving what? Information. The resting membrane potential occurs when the neuron is inactive, resting polarized. Now they are taking you back the same. However, when the neuron is resting, most of the time when the neuron are resting is when you are asleep or when you are in coma. Everything slows down in your body. You're in coma, everything is quiet. You are asleep, everything is quiet. We say that your neurons are inactive, are resting. We call the process a polarized state. Because everything is quiet, we call it a polarized state. Therefore, when there is a resting potential in the neuron is ready to receive information, remember we said resting membrane potential determines whether the information can be fired. Here you are resting. However, as soon as you receive information, the resting potential takes place, meaning it's ready to receive information. Through what? The neuron. They said through the axon, they are explaining to you, they are repeating. However, you can receive information through the resting potential. The resting potential determines whether information can fire or not. How can it happen? They say an action potential is triggered in an axon where the total potential reaches a particular axon. For information to pass through, it needs to be intense enough. I try to wake you up, I wake up. However, you are dizzy. Remember, you were sleeping, you are dizzy. The information can't be processed. That's what they are saying, that the information needs to be stronger enough for it to pass. The stronger enough means action potential. There needs to be an action for information to be passed. I call your name while you're walking the street. Mabu, 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 you can't hear me. You can hear that someone is calling you, but you can't grasp who's calling you. You're trying to check who's calling you. Meaning the information is not sufficient enough to get my attention. However, then I decide to shout your name, call you louder. Then you're able to hear my voice. That is action potential. They say the axon must be in a resting membrane potential for an action for an action potential to take place. The information needs to be louder enough. That's the sound potential. So I'm giving you a summary because you'll go through the slides. The recorded session where I didn't in detail. You go through the notes and you do it in detail. Now we don't have time. I just give you what they're talking about. The same. for you to transport information, for you to make sense of the information, it needs to be in a large intensity. They say some potential. It needs to be clear for it to pass the threshold. Like now, I'm presenting a class. I try to be as loud as possible so that the information can make sense to you. Passes what? The threshold. Where? Through exon hillock. In short, the larger the sound, the more it makes sense of what I'm saying. Or the more I emphasize some points, is the more the message will pass the threshold so that you make sense of the information. Remember what you said. When you receive information through resting membrane potential, the neuron, there's action potential, whether the information is stronger enough to pass through. We said sodiums and potassium, they start moving inside. The fluids, they move inside and out. The ions move inside and out. So mostly what happens, the sodium that is outside moves inside. They say when an action potential membrane is triggered, the membrane becomes permeable to sodium ion. So firstly, sodium ion, they allow sodium ion to move what? Inside, which rushes into the axon, moving from higher sodium concentration of the axon to the lower that is inside. When you get information, sodium ions from the outside goes inside. That's number one. You get information, sodium ions move from the outside to the inside. That will be the process. However, the more the sodium goes inside, the neuron inside become overpopulated by what? By the positive sodium ion. The more you receive information, like now, I'm busy presenting a class to you. At some point, you become tired because I've been talking. You become tired, meaning sodium ions are more concentrated now on the inside. It's supposed to be outside. Now they are more inside. Then you lose concentration. For you to come back to life, not to lose concentration, the potassium ions which is inside, need to push the sodium outside. Remember, potassium is inside, sodium is inside. The more you concentrate, the more you listen to me, sodium goes inside. However, you become less deconcentrated. Your concentration starts to be blurry. You are tired. Potassium that is inside need to push sodium ion outside. That is the process. They say now the membrane becomes depolarized. What happens? There is no potential difference. Then potassium ion moves outside now, pushes the sodium ion outside. The membrane is depolarized once again. The more it pushes the sodium ion outside, the potassium pushes sodium outside, the membrane become repolarized. They say it regains strength. The membrane, the neurons regain strength, gaining potential difference between the inside and outside. For us to receive information, they should not be equal. You should gain the potential difference between outside and inside. That is sodium ions. The process continues until the potassium ion outside, until there's more potassium ions outside than the inside. Then it's what? It gains strength. So that's the process they are repeating. When you receive information, sodium ions go inside until there's a process whereby potassium needs to push sodium ion outside. That's a process. Now and again, that's what happens in your body, in your neuron. The exchange, the movement inside, the movement outside, the movement inside, the movement outside. At this stage, the axon is hyperpolarized. We can say it's easy, hyperactive. It does not last long before the axon starts to return to its resting membrane. Remember, for us to receive information, we need to be in a resting membrane phase. They say that neuron becomes hyperpolarized. For instance, we have millions of neurons. When one neuron gets tired, the other neuron takes over. However, that neuron won't work in that period because it's hyperpolarized until it reaches what? The resting membrane is ready to work again, is ready to transport information. You see, that's the process. The axon is now reflectory period. The axon is now in a reflectory period. During this period, the membrane returns its sodium and potassium ions in the original state. It pumps the sodium to the outside and potassium back to the inside. The question is, what factor, what happens in the body, in our neurons? What manages the potassium and the sodium. For the potassium to push out the sodium ion and for the sodium ion to be allowed to move out. That process is a reflectory period, they say. An exon is now in a reflectory period. During this period, the membrane returns sodium and potassium to its original state. Remember, its original state, sodium needs to be high outside. Potassium needs to be higher inside. Sodium outside, potassium inside. It's through the process called reflectory period. Without the reflectory period, we won't be able to manage our fluids inside and outside. Due to reflectory period, it allows them to go to their original states by pushes sodium to the outside and potassium also back to inside, so that we can work, the neurons can work again. At the beginning of the reflectory period, the neuron does not respond to any stimulus. So in this process, the neuron will not respond to any stimulus. That one neuron that is highly concentrated will not respond to any stimulus. That means absolute reflectory period, because it's time to regain what? Strength. At this stage, the axon cannot conduct an impulse towards an end of the reflectory period when more sodium and potassium ion has been returned to the outside, respectively. They say at this stage, neurons won't be able to work until it finishes the regaining process. You need to regain strength before it pushes back, before it starts to work again. You see? So they will change neurons in and out, in and out. That's the process. In and out, sodium in, later needs to go out. The more I talk, the more you work. So that's the process of action. So it's resting in action. So this is a summary that's just breaking down what we've just discussed. In simplest terms, they say characteristics of impulse conduction. Once the impulse is initiated into axon, once the information is reached in the axon hillock, it is rapidly conducted along the axon. This reaction causes changes in the axon. What changes? Sodium inside, potassium outside. The movement of the fluids, that changes. In this way, changes spread down the axon from one segment to the next, from one neuron to the next, the exchange. When the segment finishes conducting the impulse, it enters the reflectory period. Remember, reflectory period is the one that balances the ions. It pushes out, it balances the sodium and the potassium. That's the reflectory period, follows impulse down the axon, which means that the impulse can be conducted in one direction. Impulse can be conducted in one direction. If this neuron can't process information, it continues to the next neuron. The information does not go back. It continues in one direction. The reflectory period prevents what? Overstimulation. For the neurons not to burst, for the neurons not to continue sending information, is because of the reflectory period. Hence, the reflectory period, what it does, it balances the fluid inside and outside. Let's say, for instance, the larger sound means more impulses are processed through the axon. The softer sounds, few impulses, like I've said. The larger the sound, it's easier to hear a person. However, the softer the sound, you can't grasp information. Impulses is an all or nothing affair. It's either the impulse fires or not. If the sound is not enough, if the touch is not enough, if there's no intensity in what you receive, it means that the impulse, it can either fire or not fire. Once the impulse has been triggered, it is conducted with the same strength and the same speed along the entire axon. So this is a process. They're just giving you a summary of these two slides. You'll go through it. I'm looking at time. So we'll go through it. It's just a summary on what happens. And again, you use that link you sent you last week to check the presentation, the first presentation. You'll give you this information. However, I break it down slowly. Slowly, I break it down. Again, here they determine for information to move quick or slow. What constitutes that? They say there are two more aspects of impulse conduction that are essential concerning the speed of impulse. That is, although the strength and the speed of an impulse are constant in a particular neuron, it can vary with nerve fibers of different thickness. The larger the nerve fiber means information will move quicker. The thickness of the neuron, of the nerve, of the neuron. The thicker the neuron, the information moves quicker, but the tinier the neuron, information moves slowly. That's what determines speed. Or the neuron. You see the neuron, myelin sheath. The neuron is what is inside this. Then the myelination sheath which covers the neuron. They say to you, the thicker the myelin sheath, information will be processed fast. When the neuron has this myelinated sheath, when it's covered by myelin sheath, information moves fast. When it's not covered by myelin sheath, the information moves slowly. You see the difference. When it's uncovered, it moves slowly. So this is the process. You see the first neuron attaches with what? The second neuron. This is how they attach. You receive information from the first dendrite, it goes straight to the feet of the neuron, then transport the information to another neuron. That's the process. They are connected from one neuron to the next, transport information. So guys, to get a detailed, I gave you a glimpse on what you'll get in the slides. This is what you'll get in the slides. I've given you a glimpse. So just check the links. The same link that you use to connect to the classes, use the same link, you'll find what? The presentation that I've done before. You'll find human nervous system in the brain, you'll find sensation and perception. Due to time, I have to end here. You'll find those slides, similar slides. It's a repetition. Then, and good luck to your first exam, but I'll be giving you a second presentation after this. 11 o'clock is a second presentation under PYC1502. PYC1502, 3 hours as well. Since you are writing that exam, I think on the 23rd, this one you're writing on the 26th. Yes, so on my side, I'm done. To get more detail of the presentation, the link, the same link that you use that link, you'll find human nervous system and sensation and perception. Thanks very much.